Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Cope Life podcast interview series. I'm so glad to be here with you guys. Thank you for everyone who's watching. You're either watching live, you're watching the replay. I'm really excited. I wanted to just mention a couple of things to you guys before I bring on my very special guest. And we have a very important special topic we're going to address today. And I'm going to tell you right now what we're going to talk about today is sexual harassment in the military. And what I wanted to let you know before we get started is just that I am Charleston Gaines. I'm an emotional intelligence life coach, and what I do is I help senior military leaders and government personnel, civilians who are transitioning to civilian life. I help you to really gain clarity so that you can build a legacy worth remembering. So if you want to contact me, just send me a DM, connect with me through LinkedIn. And without further ado, I'm going to jump right in and bring my special guest to the stage. Hello, Carol.
Hello. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's afternoon for me. It's little after 1, and it's morning for you. Where are you at?
I am in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, so I'm in Florida. You're in San Francisco. Maybe the rest of the country is, I don't know, dealing with snow or something.
Yes.
But
Yes, I
but
saw that. I saw the news this morning, and being an East Coaster originally, my empathy goes out to all those people.
all right. Well, Carol, I didn't tell too much about you. I'm leaving that up to you. So why don't we just jump right in? Tell us about yourself.
Well, I am a Brooklyn fisherman's daughter, lobster dock worker turned California girl, I guess you could say, in a nutshell. Um, and I've been out in California a long time, but I am definitely a Brooklyn girl, born and raised, and uh, and part of my journey into the military had to do with being on the water and always being on boats and growing up there. And like my first job was with a lobster dock, and I got to see the Coast Guard in action day in day out. They had two big bases where I was at in New York, and that's kind of what inspired me. Always stuck in the back of my head as something that was something exciting and an opportunity. But and my last duty station had me out here in California, and I just wound up staying. So I spent quite a few years um, in North. I was in Northern California at my duty station, and then I went down to Southern California for many years, and have created a business. This is my second time being an entrepreneur, so I guess you can call me a serial entrepreneur. and uh, and it's exciting because it's to have that opportunity again to do that. And life had interrupted the first one, the first attempt, and now I was given this new opportunity.
I love it. I love it. Just that you keep moving, you keep it going. Um, but when you talk about being stationed in Northern California at first, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did, right? Because you mentioned the Coast Guard.
Mhm.
So you were in the Coast Guard. What did you do in the Coast Guard?
I was an electronics technician, and which is really funny because it's so not me. But I listened to my brother, and and my brother's my older brother, and a lot of people say, you have to pick a trade that you can get a job when you get out, and that makes sense. But it's actually, if you know me, I'm in I spent a career in marketing communications, so. Hey, Carl, thank you. Um, yeah, so have a whole career in marketing communications because that is who I am. So, but I did my best and went through electronic school, and that's what I did. I worked, and after you go through trade school, they in the Coast Guard's different than the other armed forces because we're so small. At the time, I think they're about the same now. We only had like 40,000 members. And so it's just definitely by far the smallest service. And so when you come out of trade school, a lot of times they tell you are going to go in this specialty. You don't have a choice. It's based on their need. And so I was sent to study Loran, which kind of dates me now. And Loran is long range aids and navigation. So anybody listening, hey, if anybody's listening, now we're so used to our GPS on our phones, right? We just have Google Maps and Waze, and it's just like we don't even think about it. But back in the day when I was in there was no GPS, no. So what we were doing as a Coast Guard is we had high power transmitters rather, that were strategically placed up and down the coast. And we would transmit this very powerful signal so that pilots and ship captains could use a receiver and triangulate a signal to 99.9% accuracy. And they would know exactly where they were in the world. And so we had to maintain these transmitters. We had to also monitor them. And we had I was at a control monitor station, so the other stations could go home after 8 hours of duty, and we stayed up 24/7 to make sure everything worked. And I think it's probably like an air traffic controller equivalent, where it could be pretty monotonous and boring, but when something happens, it's everything, right? Everything stops. Because we had, if any equipment wasn't trustworthy or something was wrong, we had only 90 seconds to start what they call blink, which would tell the user, the pilot or the ship captain, our signal's bad, don't use it, because they could crash. So any mistakes, we had 90 seconds to at least get that out and then try to fix it. And if you don't, it could be catastrophic. So that was it was a very interesting and stressful, to be honest, kind of opportunity and job. But it was there. Of course, there was a lot of interesting, fun things about it too. We got to interact with the Canadian Coast Guard a lot, which was fun.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. When you explain it like that, one thing it makes me think of is when I was in the Air Force, and we had our EPRs, we had enlisted performance reports, right? So every job has some kind of evaluation or whatever. And we would turn stuff like that into the most ridiculous thing. For example, if you're in a unit in the Air Force where you're taking care of F-16s, for example. So if they're $39 million each and there's 20 of them, you would have this comment on your performance report like, took care of $800 million worth of equipment or whatever. Man. So a couple of things. I'm going to kind of ask you a loaded question here. Because you sound like that was fun. Like it was fun. It was exhilarating. You felt like you could do that, right? You learned the job and it was fun. It had some excitement, but along the lines of what we're going to talk about today, sexual harassment in the military.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come into play in your training, in your first duty station, and just kind of how has that impacted your life and career in a way from in the very beginning to where you are now, or just kind of your perspective on things involving sexual harassment?
Yeah, it was a huge learning experience. It happened. I encountered it at both duty stations and actually at training school too. I think boot camp was the only time that it didn't happen, to be honest. And it impacted me greatly, and especially, I was in boot camp. I was 18 when I went in, and I had my birthday in boot camp and turned 19. So, you're young, you're naive, you're, you don't have all those emotional intelligence skills yet on how to deal with all of this. And you're coming from like a lot of us are young when we go in. So we're coming from the family dynamic over to another dynamic where you have people telling you what to do. And, you're trusting and hoping that, they're going to take care of you. And so, yeah, it was definitely a challenge, and I also didn't really, I think being so young, I knew there wasn't many women in the Coast Guard at that time when I went in, but I didn't get the whole picture. And to give you perspective, it wasn't until 1971, I think it was, with the Title 14, came into be to help women with equal rights. So then it wasn't until 1976 that the military academies swore in their very first female cadets. So then you have the first military officers, women officers, graduating in 1980. That's not too long ago, And so, and then, I have a list of like all these historic firsts because I wanted perspective one day. And I was like, what exactly is this? And when you look at that whole thing about how crazy that is, that it wasn't that long ago. So I was, in this environment, and so I happened to be the only female at a duty station a lot, or the only female in the class, or the only female, there was a lot of that. So it was pioneering in a way, but also meant you had to clear out the cobwebs, And so at my first duty station, I was actually on a Navy base. And that was in Virginia, North Carolina. Half the base was in Virginia, half the base was in North Carolina. And so that was probably the most traumatic, I think I would say, because this is the interesting part. My supervisor, who's married and had children, he ran the military barracks. That was his job, is to run that. And so he had master keys for everything. He had control over entrance, exit, scheduling, everything. And so I was the only female at that barracks coming straight out of boot camp. And so there was so many times where, you couldn't even walk up and down stairs, that he would be there to harass, or they would have a group he would take some of the other people that lived at the barracks. And when I pulled up my car, they would be saying stuff down to me. There was like a pool on, who basically, could get me first type of thing. There was so a lot of it in the beginning was not like direct, like, when you think sexual assault, sometimes you think, like physical, and it can turn into that. And it did. But in the beginning, it was a lot of psychological, where there was no safety. And he's my supervisor. So every day I had to show up to work with him and the other men that were part of this. And it was really traumatic. And it continued and escalated to the point where he had the master keys. So he would come into my room. And there was a point in the Coast Guard, I don't know about for you as well, there was a point person that they always assigned, that an officer usually, that you could go to, that it would be completely private. It would be off the record, and you could talk to them and tell them, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. How can we fix this? How can we, change the situation for the better? And they basically are like a facilitator, mediator kind of person. And so I did that, and we had face-to-face meetings with me and my supervisor, with some representatives. And unfortunately, I hesitated for months to do that, Charleston, because I did not want the blowback, and I was really scared of that. I didn't even want to get him in trouble. That wasn't my goal. I just wanted it to stop. And I tried to do it myself, and it didn't work. And so I took this course, and of course it just blew back on me. So it just intensified for a long time. And then luckily I only had like a few months left before I was sent to my trade school. So that was a blessing, but I realized then too, is because women, when they finally said, okay, we're going to let women in to the Coast Guard and serve right alongside the men, but they really didn't have anything set up to help everybody, to help the men adjust, to help the culture adjust for women. And it was just so in its infancy that it was like the Wild West. Everybody was trying to figure out what to do. And they also didn't want bad press. So a lot of times, it was suppressed. But, and that was, I found out later on that supervisor of mine got into civilian civilian law trouble, because he was basically dating a 16-year-old. So, had something been done, when I was saying something, maybe that 16-year-old would have been saved from that experience. It's something that I always think about. It's because it's not just, I don't, I'm probably, I doubt I was the first one, that went through that. I think this is a behavior that is something that has been going on, that's been, that just escalates.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And really, the things that you said, yeah, a comment from Cheryl there. Cheryl is awesome. She's
Hi,
awesome. I
Carol.
appreciate you, being here, Cheryl, and also Shree and Carl. And
Mhm.
the things that you said though, I want to hit on a couple different points, and I'm just gonna throw some things at you, and you can respond however you want, right? But the first thing I think of is when you said you didn't want. So I'm just gonna say multiple things here, right? But the first thing is you say you didn't want him to get in trouble, but you just wanted it to stop. And so I think a lot of times when you're younger, especially when you feel like you don't fit in, such as a woman in an all male organization, you're more concerned about ruffling feathers than your own worth and value. Um, well, I'll let you comment on that before I bring up the other things.
That's You just gave me chills, Charleston. I mean, nail on the head. It absolutely is, because you um you really want to fly under the radar. I grew up, being besides men all the time. I was always the only girl that was out there in the fishing with my dad on his fishing boat. And, I used to row my boat to the lobster dock. I worked at the lobster dock. So I was used to being in a male world, but, it was intensified and completely different because of the military had you 24/7. So I thought, I can handle this. I'm used to being around this kind of thing. And you just basically, you showed your worth by doing what everybody else did. So they didn't think of you as a woman. So if they said, okay, do this, and and you're supposed to do that, that's what I did. And I took pride in that. And I felt like, okay, I'm doing the same as everybody else. I'm doing my share, being a good teammate. And the worst thing would be to be able to, in like you said, in my young mind, is thinking to draw attention and call someone out for you to ruffle feathers. That's like the perfect thing. And it was definitely a worth issue as well. I also came, to be honest, I came from in a household that I was abused at. So I'm carrying, if you think about this, the young Carol, she's carrying this baggage with her into the military. And, I won, I got academic achievements in the boot camp, and then I won they have like a physical award too for him, for all the different things. So I just I push myself to exceed what I think I can do. All I When I look back, to show that I'm worthy.
Yes.
And by ruffling feathers meant that there's something wrong with me in my young mind, right? That I'm the problem. So yeah.
Man, yeah, there's so much going on here, and again, I'm so grateful that you're here, because the truth is, how many people listening right now can relate to what you're saying, and how many people can relate to what you're saying that are no longer in the military, and maybe have those same feelings about themselves, about their self-worth and their value. Because a lot of times what happens, what you do, and I see this now. I have clients, and there's people that I've talked to just in group settings where they're so busy, and it's like, I'm working on my bachelor's degree, and I'm working out, I'm going to score 100 on this, I'm doing CrossFit, and then also I'm volunteering here, and I won this award, and I'm studying for promotion, and all of these things. Really, what's going on is, I want to do so much that you cannot deny my worth and value, because I need you to value me so that I can value myself. I need someone else to tell me my worth.
Yes. Yes. You just pretty much summed up my, 15 years of my life, and I didn't even know it yet. It was exactly, because when I got out, I served my 5 years. I did 5 years active, 4 years inactive, and used the GI Bill to go to school, which was that was my biggest goal. Nobody in my family even graduated high school, let alone college. So that was a big, again, right, goal, worth. And I pushed so hard for so long, and I didn't realize what you had, what you just shared. As I didn't realize why I was doing that. And I was fortunate, at some point, to have a light bulb go on and go through some healing to be able to come to that realization. But yeah, it was never, no matter how far I pushed to exceed and every single goal, it never gave you that feeling that you had hoped, right?
Right. Well,
Because
the thing about it. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think because you have to look from within, and that part was the hardest.
Well, it definitely is, and that's one reason why I push emotional intelligence so much, because when we're looking at trauma, we hear about different ways that you can heal from trauma, right? Heal from PTSD, EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy, prolonged exposure. There's different therapeutic techniques, but there's a point where you no longer have diagnosable PTSD. You don't have those symptoms, but you're still dealing with the self-worth, the self-esteem, and that's what lingers. And what I found in a lot of people, which is why I also applied this cognitive approach, is because you create these internal barriers. So when I say to you, you did an amazing job, you're the best, whatever, you're the best engineer or whatever on the dock or whatever, and you're thinking, wow, because you've always wanted to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a barrier. There's a barrier in your mind that says, but, and you remember 3 weeks ago, you were 5 minutes late, or you remember like 2 months
Yeah.
ago. And so that one thing in your mind,
Yeah.
that one thing invalidates all of these months of things that you've accomplished. But I want to go back to one other thing that you said, because I want people to understand when we talk about sexual harassment, you can see it in a movie or a TV show or something where some guy make some comments about a woman, and vice versa. It happens, right? Men are also victims of harassment, where a comment is made, maybe there's some inappropriate touching that the individual who was touched doesn't feel as though they were assaulted, but they're bothered. You didn't say that happened to you once. What you said was, after months of trying to get it to stop. So it wasn't an event. You weren't harassed like on a Tuesday. This was the culture. Can you talk about that culture for a little bit?
Yes. Yes. Oh, it's so interesting, because this, going back to that one duty station, the supervisor, most of the people that were there were probably around my age, that he was supervising, and he was probably, 26, 27, married with kids, but older. That's a big gap when you're young, and so he had such influence over everybody. And so he promoted, because that's what he was doing. And so he had the power, like a cult, to promote this behavior. So every morning when we would muster to start our day, and find out, okay, what assignments we're going to get, he would make comments and make it, hey, it's not only acceptable, it's cool if you make comments about her too in front of her, in front of the group. So he made it okay to do that. And some of them, probably were confused too. They were young. They're going, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And it just breeds it. Now you think about, if they work with this person for a year or two, they go to their next duty station. What did they learn young in their career? Right? They take this going, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is okay. Nothing's happening. He does this, and it's, and all of us are cool. And it's like, she's the problem. So it was very, how would you say it? I contributed to like a cult kind of atmosphere, because they have full control over you. And and it would be, I would get the worst assignments, the assignments that nobody wanted to do every day. And I would just do them and tough it out and be like, well, okay, throw it at me. I can handle this. And you're not going to break me, but there are moments where inside I'm in my room and I'm like, oh my God, I'm breaking, but I didn't want to show them that, and then every time I would pull up my car, and the barracks was it reminds me of like a Motel 8 kind of building, 2 stories, the doors on the outside, and they would sit up right by my door. And so when I pull up, they'd all be sitting up there and they would say stuff. And then they would harass me as I go up and down the stairs, whether it's just words or touching or something. And just really a lot of verbal abuse. But and then there would be rumors, that always are going around. There was a rumor, they were saying, oh, she's gay. She because she doesn't want anything to do with us. Or, she only likes this and this, or just all these horrible like lies just throwing around constantly that I had to basically deal with as this young person. And yet there was nobody really you could talk to. I eventually, what helped me too was I made friends. I had played volleyball in high school and college. I went to college a little bit before in the Coast Guard. And so I found that the Navy had a volleyball team, and it was made up mostly of officers, but they let me play. And kind of connecting with them and being friends with them, the Navy people on this team got together and asked the Coast Guard to transfer me over to their Navy rec department. So I got to spend some time at the Navy rec department before I left for school, which saved me. So it was, the Coast Guard unfortunately didn't, but the Navy, the Navy came and helped me all through that volleyball connection. I still had to live and deal with the barracks, but there was, at least I had a break on some of that. But it was very, very intense. And then I should say too, when I was at my California duty station, there was, in Loran, they basically have they have a lot of also isolated duty stations. And so there might be 5 people and you're stationed there for like a year. And talk about mental health. And I know, Charleston, this is something that, you really help with too. So they send these members to these isolated duty stations for a year. They don't know what to expect. They're not really prepared well. They don't have any of the extra, no one's thinking about extra help, from mental and emotional and all of that. And then their time is up, and then they send them back to another station, that's not isolated. And so I would see these men come back, and they were a shell. They were traumatized by this experience. And in that, they also had such issues with trying to connect and reconnect that their boundaries were messed up. So a lot of them come back from isolated duty, also wind up being harassers. But I kind of went through that as well, but I don't see that as the same as what happened to me before. But it was more of a boundary issue, and seeing a woman for the first time in a year. And now, because all of the RAND stations are not in populated areas. So we only had 21 people at our duty station, and we were in the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of semi-isolated as well.
It's kind of wild when you think about it, because the idea is that your job, you're a professional. I can send you anywhere and you just do your job. But we're human beings and we just don't work like that. And so you remind me of just some data that, some data from a few years ago when I was researching it more often, and it found that, you're talking about isolated areas. This research found that over 50% of women who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan with PTSD, over 50% developed PTSD due to sexual assault while deployed. It wasn't the Taliban, it wasn't Al Qaeda. It was our team members. And then when you talk about some men coming back from these isolated locations who seem wrecked in some way, Obviously I don't know their stories, right? I wasn't there. But I will say that men are also victims of sexual assaults. And I know in some places, and I'll use the Navy as an example. The Navy has a SARC station in Naples, Italy, and the SARC is a sexual assault response coordinator. But this SARC is responsible for responding to sexual assault in multiple locations, not just Naples, Italy. And so maybe you want to talk to someone, but you are in the Navy and you are forward deployed to a training base, maybe somewhere, in the Middle East, in Poland, in Syria, somewhere. And so you can't reach out. And then there's that belief, right? Going back to the self-worth. I don't even know this person. They don't care about me. I'm not even going to see them. I'm just going to try to handle it myself, heal myself. And then you come back broken. So a question I want to ask you now, and the reason why I felt it appropriate for us to have this conversation about sexual harassment today is because on the 27th of January, what is that, a week ago, about something like that,
Mhm.
um, it became law that sexual harassment is a crime punishable under the UCMJ. And so for people who don't know what UCMJ is, it is actual law, right? It's not just rules of engagement or suggestions. It is actual law approved through the legislative branch in Congress. It's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And so when you violate the UCMJ, it's a crime, and there it's not the same as, maybe your local, wherever you live, right? Local and state law. So you can actually commit a crime as a military member that is a misdemeanor in whatever state you live in. But because you're in the military, it falls under UCMJ jurisdiction. And so now, as of a week, sexual harassment is a crime under the UCMJ. So first of all, how do you feel about that?
About time. It is. To be honest, I just assumed it already happened because, it just seems incredibly crazy, but obviously not after, poor, the it took Vanessa Gillian, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, out of where was it? It was in Texas, Fort Hood, her brutal murder. She was being harassed for so long, and it was being swept under the rug at her station, and she wound up being brutally murdered. And but her, you know it finally gave the impetus to make a change, and bring about this law. And it's such a shame that it had to come down that road. But I honestly am just beyond words to think that, why did this not happen sooner? If women were already allowed in, in what we said in the 70s, 1970s, this is so long. But thank God, thank God that now it's there, it's recognized as as an actual offense. Um, and But it's, the biggest thing is to make sure that the culture is addressed, and for everybody to feel safe, because you know it's not just about workplace safety. It's about your life, and it's about, um, you're asking military members to put their lives at risk for the country, and doing all types of jobs, and put, every single day so many members are doing that. Now, how can you do that and be your best if you are being attacked, right? At your place that you are supposed to be safe at. Now you put them in danger, and they are supposed to be, taking care of the country, keeping us all safe here. And yet they have to deal with that load. That they're not capable of being the best that they can be when they have that pressure. So, I hope that this law not only, is a win for getting justice, but I hope it also spurs about a change in the culture to make it more of a priority.
Right. Yeah, I agree, right? It's the change in culture. It's not just you did this one time, here's your punishment. there's a culture, there's peer pressure, because there's a lot of people that actually join the military because they want to be a part of something. They want to feel like they belong. They want to have worth and value and significant interpersonal relationships. And so they join the military. And what happens? Oh, well, in this culture, one thing that's cool that we do is we harass people sexually. And so if we can change the culture, then a lot of these new people entering that culture can just know right off the bat, that's not tolerated here. That sexual harassment is not okay here. And,
Mhm.
and I'll tell you a story about my first duty station. Speaking of culture, so I was one of those kids. I just wanted to be cool. I wanted to be liked. What do the cool kids do? How can I imitate the cool kids, right? And so I get to my first duty station, and the cool kid, 30-year-old technical sergeant, E6 in the Air Force, 30 years old, single, seemed like the coolest guy, right? And this is what he said. He's 30 years old. I really only talk to 18-year-olds. And if we're not talking about sex within the first 30 minutes, I'm done talking to them. As an 18-year-old, impressionable, naive, I thought that was cool. I
Yeah.
wanted to aspire to be that level of filth, really. Like, I wanted to aspire to be that level of like disgusting. But I thought it was like, oh, this is what the cool guy does. And fortunately for me, I had a lot of friends who were not, I would say, as impressionable as I was, who just they thought that's weird. Don't be like that. So I was able to lean on my friends. But if my friends acted like that, I would have acted like that to try to be cool.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times at that very young age, you don't even really know what your own values and standards are. Have you really established boundaries when you're 18 years old? And so that was the culture, you know.
Mhm.
Whereas now with this, it's we have established from the top of the chain, that this is not acceptable. And so I guess what I want to ask you is, how do you think your career would have been different if this was in effect when you first joined?
Mm. Well, I have to imagine that it would have made a big difference, um, because being in there early on when it was just really the Wild West, pretty much as soon as my 5 years, I knew as soon as my 5 years was up, I was done. And so that was kind of sad, because being someone that grew up on the water and always, you know, just wanting to be out there, it's and doing what I can to help people. It was something that was also part of my dream, and and I think it would have probably made a huge difference. It's interesting because I can't even imagine, the difference, because of what I my complete experience is, could be different from someone else's, but for me, this would have had a big impact, because you would have had some uh, some sanity to let you know that it's not you. You're not crazy. That there is a legal term, there is a legal, avenue. Not that you want to take it, but that that almost gives you that justification in your head that it's not, it's not about the worth of you or anything like that. Because it's the same thing if someone says murder's wrong, right? We know that. And it was never deemed as wrong. It was always deemed as something up. Shh, you know, Master Sergeant, you just let it go, or whatever the case may be. And yeah, boys will be boys, just is. And that would have made a big difference if they couldn't do that. And like you said as well, you're the 30-year-old that you kind of admired was similar to the supervisor that I had. He had this group of young men that were just like that. And he was, basically saying, this is how you act. And they're looking at him the same way, thinking that's so cool. And that foundation was in their head, and they move on to another duty station, and, and it just repeats. So I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful about this law. I think it's so hopeful. I know it's not going to be overnight by any means.
Right. It's not overnight, but really what happens is for a large majority of commanders and senior leaders, senior enlisted leaders, um, there's this culture, right? And
Mhm.
in circles that I've been in, we call it rape culture. And
Yeah.
so within rape culture, there's things that are just acceptable. So even if you oppose something, it's like, how do I oppose it? Because
Yeah.
it's not like once you put on a little more rank, all of a sudden you don't care what people think. No, you always do. Like, let's be honest. Oh, you've been in 23 years, you're an E8 or you're a colonel. You still care what your peers think. And so now you have another leg to stand on. Now your opinion doesn't even matter. I don't care what you think about sexual harassment. It's in the UCMJ. And
Exactly.
and this is part of carrying out the orders of, the officers appointed above me. This is the UCMJ. And
Hmm.
so even if I thought it was cool, I now have specific guidelines. And then the ones who do think it's cool, their peers can now say to them, remember what you were doing that's not acceptable anymore. And it gives you a stronger foundation to oppose those things that you see. And then when you look at the core values, right? So I'm talking about the Air Force core values where integrity first, service before self, excellence in all you do. Well, if you have those core values, then follow the UCMJ and do what you're supposed to do. So I'm excited. I'm
Hmm.
excited about there's a lot of change coming. But what I want to ask you, I want to pivot this conversation. I want to talk about how did you go from that? Because when it happens over and over and over, and you continually wake up daily in a fight or flight mode where
Yeah.
you dread going to work, that's traumatic.
Yeah.
And the longer it goes on, the more the quantity of incidents increases, the more traumatic it is.
Hmm.
But you went from that to where you are now. So what I want to know is kind of what you're doing now and how you're able to overcome that and get to where you are now.
Mm. That's a if you ask me, at any point, what do you want to be or what do you see yourself as, I would have never imagined where I'm at. And in a good way. It's really interesting. I love how life just organically happens around you and when you do the work, right? And so right now, I'll share a little bit about what I do now, and then go back to how it kind of happened and what helped me get there. So right now, I just in November launched a new business where I am working to help founders of startups create a culture of well-being that people just love to work at. That where the leaders themselves enjoy, the people around there thrive and enjoy. And I think with this great resignation and the pandemic, everybody's really reprioritizing their life. What's important? What means a lot to me? What is life about? There's more of a, hey, life is short. What does this, what does it look like for me? What gives me joy? So I want to be a person that is creating a solution to help these young startups create that culture of well-being. And it's interesting because I didn't realize until not too long ago why I do what I do. And then when I looked back, Charleston, I realized I've been doing it my whole life and I just didn't know it. And even in the military, which you're just supposed to take orders and do whatever you need, whatever they tell you to do. I was always the one who was going, Chief, what if we organized like a little morale trip? We all went whitewater rafting. Chief, what if we had created an onboarding program for those coming from isolated duty so that they can kind of reintegrate into the station better, and get them up to speed, and I would be always thinking this way and doing that, and not always met with open arms because in the military, they wanted to do what they want to do. So they did what the training thing was funny was they said, okay, all right, Petty Officer Horn, you do it. So I just got myself more extra work on top of my other stuff, but I did it. So I created a little training program and I would run that. So when people came on board, they had a warm body to kind of guide them and help them get on speed with what we do in the station, our maintenance schedule, all that kind of stuff. So everywhere I went, I just always was looking around. How can I make this a better place? And because even in the civilian world, I saw so many companies that were treating the people poorly. And they thought that people were just dollar signs and, it's not worth their time or effort to care. They can always get someone else to fill the boots. And I'm like, no, that makes no sense. Invest in your people. They'll be more productive because they care more and they want to be there. So you'll get more out of them, but I was just beating my head against the wall, and trying to get people to listen, but I never knew that was my career. I didn't know until now, and it's really funny. And, but what got me there was healing, to be honest. I wouldn't have even had a chance. I had, like I had mentioned, I had childhood trauma. Then I had the Coast Guard trauma of the sexual assaults. And but I was very lucky. Actually, one of the bonuses in the Coast Guard was I met my hubby, and we're still married. And so I met him at the Coast Guard, the last duty station I was at. But we followed our career together, which was very funny. We were in boot camp the same time, didn't know it. We were in electronics school the same time, we didn't know it. And then we wind up at the last duty station together. But he helped my sanity, having someone that says you're not crazy, and giving me that extra support mentally and emotionally. That was huge. So I was very lucky there. And when I got out of the Coast Guard, and our goal was to go to college. So we were working and going to college, and I realized I had a lot of anger pent up. And I am usually a happy person, but I didn't realize I had this anger inside of me, and something would happen that would be small. Maybe someone cut me off, or, someone stepped on my toe, something just, nothing too crazy. And the anger that would come out was scary. And I said, who is this? And where is this coming from? And what the heck? And I learned, so I basically sought out therapy at that point. I went to the college, had a counseling services, and I started there just with therapy. And I said, okay, I need to figure out what's going on, because this something is not right. And then that led to me going to an outside therapist. And I just said, every time I would learn and search out different ways to heal. So at some point, I didn't want to keep telling my story, over and over again about and reliving it, because I felt I understand the value in therapy, but to me, I was like, okay, I'm ready for the next step. So I started searching for everything that I could think of. And so I was like a sponge. So I tried acupuncture. I started doing Tai Chi and Qigong, which brought me to meditations, which brought me to yoga, which brought me to energy healing. And so then I started taking classes and getting certified in Reiki energy healing and shamanic practices and all types of different things, all with the intention of just trying to heal myself, just to try to get to know myself better and to reduce this anxiety and this anger. And it's been, a whole life work of doing that. And I still do this to this day. But I didn't realize back then that anger was all the hurt and the the damage that was just, I was holding it in my body, the trauma, basically. And so that anger was coming out from that in ways that didn't make sense, without the context, right? And so I think of that because I have friends that have served that were, in Afghanistan or different places, and the PTSD, a lot of times it just comes out, and you think, where is this coming from, right? It doesn't always make sense, but the trauma, I think, and this better than I do, right? It holds in your body, and there's got to be ways to release that and to move past it, and that's the inner work that I did helped me tremendously just to keep growing and to keep learning about myself and find ways to reduce anxiety and find ways to deal with the past, the present, anything that comes my way. And I think once, every time that I took, another type of growth step as far as, what else I can do to heal, it empowered me too, because I thought, okay, it's not, I actually look back on all my experience, even though it's, scary and no one wants to go through it. I look back at it and I go, you know what? That's okay. That's happened. I'm here now. And, there are so many gifts, and I'm the person I am today because I went through that. So I find it very easy to relate to a lot of people and to be that empathetic person to have conversations and try to help. And that, had I not had that, experience, then I wouldn't be able to do that.
The things that you said in the last couple minutes really are really could be the foundation for a course, right? because there's so many gems, there's so much knowledge, and so I want to kind of just break it down, right? The way that I perceive, kind of a macro level view of what you're talking about. First and foremost, for me, it's about the self-awareness.
Mhm.
It's about recognizing what you feel, why you feel that way, how you express and experience those emotions. And so the way you expressed it was those anger outbursts. And so then what happened was you recognized that you needed to manage those emotions, which for people that don't know, that's a second domain of emotional intelligence based on Dr. Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence. And so there's the self awareness and there's the emotion regulation. But then on top of that, there is elevating your standards. You raised your standards for your own behavior. You said, I have to stop acting like this. So let me raise my standards of who I am. And raising your standards required you taking ownership, taking responsibility. You can't heal the way that you healed if it's everyone else's fault.
Yeah.
And so you took responsibility, you took ownership, and it's such an empowering thing because there's so many victims out there that can learn from your example where you said, okay, I did this, I got a little better. I did this, got a little better. Did this, got a little better. But it was never, and I'm assuming here, right? Because I don't know what your thoughts and feelings at the time, but I'm assuming that you avoided the thoughts and emotions of I'm not fully healed, so I'm going to quit. It was I'm a little better. And so what you did was you deployed patience and grace to yourself to work through the process. And a
Yeah.
big part of that is recognizing that you deserved the patience, you deserved grace, you deserved time in the process to heal. Because at some point in time, you woke up and you said to yourself, I'm worthy of this healing. Right? So I'm so excited. I'm so happy you're here. I want to apply this quote to what you're doing now, and then we can just kind of get into that more. Um, the quote that I've seen so many times across social media, more often on LinkedIn than the other sites, is people don't quit their jobs, they quit their managers.
Yep.
And what you're doing, you counter that fact for a lot of people. So
Mhm.
what I want you to do is just talk about that a little bit more, and then how people can get in touch with you, and whatever else you want to say. This is your time because I am so grateful and appreciative of you for being here, Carol.
Well, Charleston, I am So grateful that you're out there doing the wonderful work that you do to help so many people, so many of us veterans and everybody else. Not just veterans, but is that just so near and dear to our hearts, right?
Yes.
But so thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I like I said, it was interesting how I wound up here because it was also very, very organic, and I had just gotten laid off in the summer and was thinking, what's my next step? What do I want to do? And organically, it started forming that I've got to be part of this solution. There's no reason that a workplace cannot have a culture that is inclusive, that inspires and provides this safe space so that their employees can absolutely thrive because it's in the business's best interest because they will thrive. So there is no downside to it. What was missing was almost like, interestingly enough, almost like the military law that Biden just, the order that he just gave. Because for so long in corporate America, it was, sweep it under the rug and, oh, who cares about this and that? And nobody held it really to them. And now the pandemic, in a way, I look at the pandemic as, Biden's order on the UCMJ to add that. The pandemic said, hey, this is an opportunity. And people are either you change and evolve as a company and how you, run your organization, or you're not going to have the people to help you run your business. And it's been, I think if the pandemic didn't happen, I wouldn't have been able to launch the business. I think it had to be the right place, the right time for hearts to be open. And I think there's so many stories out there that you can hear and see of businesses who are embracing that and saying, I'm going to take a few minutes and work with my team and figure out, what are our do's and don'ts of our operation? What's acceptable or what's not acceptable? And God, I wish we did that, when I was in the Coast Guard. I'm sorry, to that supervisor. No, this is acceptable behavior. This isn't. This is how, it sounds so like simple, but it's much more complicated, but it's so doable. It's absolutely doable. So for me, it's an amazing, exciting time because I want to help. Like I'm basically focusing on startup founders that have less than 50 people, let's say, so really early stage, because I feel like I can make the most difference. Because at that early stage, they're very product focused, and they probably don't even have an HR person there. They really don't have the soft skills person to help them create that. And I feel like that's the perfect time to create the do's and the don'ts, to create, a sense of belonging and comfort, that when they start growing and scaling, that it can go with them and it can scale with them. The culture's there. If they're already grown and scaled up and got, their Series D at this point, it may be too late to try to recreate the wheel and come up with a culture. So it is so important to be able to do that. And to me, it's my, now I realize it's exactly what I was put on this earth to do, is to try to help those founders create that. And it's so interesting how life just brings you to that point. And part of what I love to do as well is, I figure when you're working with the startups, they're so busy. The startup founders, a lot of times, they may not have the time to invest. And so being their advisor to help them through that and to take care of a lot of that burden, but help them get that going, is a privilege, and it's exciting, and it's a service. Again, I could be of service and help them. And part of what I offer is to help them first get a presence on LinkedIn and maybe some other social media. I want them to be able to use their voice, to amplify what their vision is, because people want to follow leaders that have a vision and that can clearly communicate it. That's what gets people excited and gets them inspired. And they're like, like you said about that quote, right? So if there is a manager or a leader that inspires and everything they do, the actions they take show that they care about their people, hey, that's the person I want to follow. That's the company I want to work with. So helping them build a presence online, I think, is the first step to attracting the right employees for them, the right investors. So it starts out, that's one of the ways I can help. And then I can also help build out and help them with content and communication. And then also going in to the organization itself and working with the teams in a very collaborative process to create their culture guidelines and then implement them. So yeah, I'm very excited about this, and it's an infant at this point, that so it's very, very exciting.
I love it. It's so important. It's so important. I love what you're saying. It's just sounds like we're talking about really aligning the vision and company culture so that people love to work there.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, they don't think about that in the beginning, but they need to think about it, because that's where the real growth happens. Because I don't just want the business to grow, but I want my people to grow. We all grow together, and I love that you have that expertise and that you're able to do that, because you're able to look back on your experiences, in the Coast Guard, and then what you've done since then, growing, building your career, your previous job, what it felt like being laid off. You've been through a lot, you bring a lot, and I really appreciate you and all that you offer. And so, last thing, well, two things I want to ask. Two last questions. The first question, I'm going to ask them both right now, but the first thing I want you to say is a final message for people who are in toxic work environments right now, a message of hope or inspiration. And then, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I love that. um, for anybody who's going through that right now, is to know, number one, that they're not alone, because that's one of the things that I felt, from when I was on that other side too, is, again, you have a little bit of that, oh, is it me, am I crazy, what's going on, that you're not alone. And that one of the things that I want to do is also have, it's, you have to start from the top. So I want to work with the founders, but you also have to work with the teams. So one of the ways I want to help is to also work with individual employees who may be in that situation, who are in a toxic environment, and try to help them enact change from their side, so that it either helps them be feel empowered, and give them some tools to be able to see if they can make change, at the same time provide uh, just support as an advocate for them in any capacity to be able to get out. And I'd like to create a community. I think that's where this is going towards, Charleston. I think about community, creating a community, because I think all the people that are in those toxic work environments have such a wealth of knowledge about what works, what doesn't work, how can we make this better. And I would like to harness all of that and use it for good. Take that pain, but create a culture of guideline in general, not just for like what I like to work for the organizations, but in general for the world, as far as what's acceptable and not acceptable. And so if I can help, anybody who's in that toxic workplace now, and they need some, inspiration, support, a friend, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, reach out. And to any of those startup founders, if they just are looking for some, for an advisor that will put her heart and soul into it and help them get, to be get their vision come to life, and bring all their people along with them for the journey, then please, for sure, follow me on LinkedIn, reach out, DM me. I would love to help.
All right. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you. I'm so grateful you're here. It's a big time and big change with the change in UCMJ, and you bringing that story to life. People helping people realize that this isn't just some new off the cuff thing. It's been an issue for a long time,
Yeah.
and it's being addressed at the highest levels. And I'm glad that you were here to share your story. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone that tuned in and watched. And if you got something from it, if we were able to inspire you or inform you, just let us know in the comments. And I will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charleston. Thank you, everyone.